love the internet. You might love the internet too. You probably have your own reasons. Maybe you like seeing pictures of your friends' cats on Facebook. Or maybe you like laughing out loud at cats who want cheeseburgers. Or like me, are particularly enamored of cats made of Pop-Tarts who fly through space on rainbows. Because of all the things I love about the internet, the massive amount of creativity that it has unleashed is my favorite. I first heard about the internet in the back of a Babysitter's Club book when I was 10. It was an ad for the Prodigy internet service, and strangely enough, my parents did not want to pay $10 a month so that I could talk to strangers about books. But when I finally did get online a few years later, I discovered that one of my favorite forms of creativity is actually a kind of remix, and lots of people were already doing it. I was writing my own stories about Babysitter's Club characters. And it turns out this is called fanfiction. And people have been writing stories about other people's characters for decades. But with the internet, they suddenly had a much easier way to share them with each other. So I stopped writing stories about Babysitter's Club and started writing stories about Star Trek. And now, 20 years later, I am basically a professor of people doing cool things on the internet. But when I was in high school, in the mid-90s, it didn't occur to me that my Star Trek stories might be copyright infringement. This was pre-Napster. We didn't even think copying a song was copyright infringement. At this point, no one really cared about copyright except lawyers and corporations and professional content creators. But now we care, because now all of us are content creators. Facebook status updates, tweets, image memes, YouTube videos, stories about Star Trek. Now we're all creating new things, often using existing media. Because this cat isn't popular just because of the first cat. It's all the cats that came after it. Remixed cats, new versions of cats, all of these creative cats. As Lawrence Lessig says, we don't live in a read-only culture anymore, it's a read-write culture. We can comment with media as much as we can comment on media. And we do. This was why I started writing stories about Star Trek in the first place. I wanted to give the female characters more to do. I thought that Uhura had it in her to be more than a telephone operator, and so I wrote stories where she and Christine Chapel, the nurse, saved the day over and over again. And then I shared these stories with other people online, and I felt like I'd really said something. Because this is one of the amazing things, the combination of this democratized creativity and saying something. Because now, we don't need a publisher to share a novel with the rest of the world. We don't need a distributor to create a film. Before the internet, even sharing Star Trek stories required staplers and stamps. And if you wanted to say something important, you had to convince a newspaper to publish an op-ed. But YouTube videos these days have more views than op-eds. And we can use this read-write culture to say important things. Maybe you want to comment about the portrayal of women in video games, so use clips from those video games to show patterns. Or maybe you want to make political commentary using politicians' own words and a little bit of humor, so you make a political remix video. Everyone these days has something to say, and we have the ability to say it to a lot of people. Let me tell you a story about a time when I had something important to say. In 2014, there was a controversy around Barbie and sexism. Now, this was 20 years after Barbie said math is hard. This time the message was girls can't code. Let me briefly recap the plot of the published book, Barbie, I Can Be a Computer Engineer. Barbie is sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, and Skipper asks her what she's doing. Barbie says she's creating a video game, which is pretty cool, and so Skipper asks if she can play the game, and Barbie says, laughing, "I'm only creating the design ideas. I need Steven and Brian to turn it into a real game." After this, Barbie realizes that her computer is infected with a virus, and in trying to fix it, she infects Skipper's computer with a virus. Luckily, there's a happy ending. Steven and Brian fix both the computers and finish the video game. Boys to the rescue. I probably don't have to tell you what's wrong with this story. I could have done an entire talk about the representation of women in technology fields, how today young girls are often still told that it's okay if they're not as good at math as boys. Girls are good at design ideas, and boys are good at building things. The good that could be done from suggesting that a girl like Barbie could be a computer engineer can be undone by a narrative like this. Of course, we had the typical internet outrage over this after a blogger brought this book to the world's attention. At the time, I was finishing up my dissertation, so procrastinating, and therefore completely on board with this outrage. And I thought at the time, at least this is going to be a meme, because it's so bad. I thought this is the kind of thing that our read-write culture is built to tear to pieces. And then I thought, well, I could do that. And again, I was procrastinating from my dissertation, so I thought it was a really good idea. So I took a night and I rewrote the entire book. I learned what everyone was outraged about. I got some feedback from my roommate. I blanked all the pages in Photoshop and created a brand new narrative. In my story, Barbie and Steven and Brian are still creating a game together, but Barbie happens to be the one doing the coding. And the drama is not Barbie's utter incompetence when it comes to computer security, but instead, internet trolls suggesting that she can't be the one doing the coding on this video game because she's a girl. My story also has a happy ending. Barbie ignores the trolls. She and Steven and Brian make a great game, and at the end she realizes that, yeah, she can be a computer engineer. So I posted Barbie Remixed, now with less sexism, on my blog. And the next day, it had 50,000 hits, and there was a story about it in Cosmo. I didn't expect this to go viral. I doubt you ever do. But the response was overwhelmingly positive. And it wasn't just the commentary about the original book. The blogger who'd written about it the first time had done a great job of that already. But the way that I critiqued it using the original, people got it. It said something new. In fact, the piece of criticism that I did get was, isn't this copyright infringement? Mattel is going to sue you. I have a law degree. My area of expertise is copyright law and internet law. And actually, this critique did not surprise me at all. That dissertation I was finishing was in part about the confusion in the law around remix and how it impacts the way that people are creative online. After all, haven't you ever wondered why Saturday Night Live can parody television shows or songs? Why you can quote a book in a book review? Or this massive amount of creativity, the image memes you're sharing on Facebook over and over. If everything that is ever a copy of anything was always copyright infringement, then our entire creative production would look really different. The point of copyright law in the Constitution is to promote creativity and innovation. The idea is that if you spend 10 years writing a novel, and then as soon as you publish it, someone else can copy it word for word and publish it again, and then reap all of the financial rewards, you might not want to spend so much time writing that novel. This bit of control over your creative production is intended as an incentive. But most of our current copyright laws were penned in the 70s, before the internet, when the idea that so many people would create so many things and have no expectation of being paid for it seemed a little crazy. So if our current copyright laws seem slightly broken when it comes to the internet, it's because they weren't built to deal with the ways that we're being creative now. And sometimes copyright law isn't used quite as intended anyway. If it's meant to be a shield to protect yourself from other people exploiting your work or profiting off of your work, consider if it's used as a sword instead, to hack away at criticism or free speech. Luckily, the law accounts for this. In the United States, there's something called fair use, which is an exception to copyright law. It's intended as a safety valve between copyright and free speech. After all, imagine if you always had to ask permission for everything. Dear book publisher, may I please quote a paragraph from your book so that I can trash it in my review? Or can I use the images from your book so that I can convey to the world how sexist it is? Again, copyright law is intended to promote creativity, not to kill criticism. And this is why criticism and commentary are a big part of this exception to copyright law. You might think, well, it usually works out okay. After all, Mattel did not sue me. But not all copyright holders are so reasonable. For example, I've spoken to many people over the course of my research who have gotten cease and desist letters over remix videos on YouTube or Fanfiction. It's a lot easier for a copyright holder to have something taken down than it is to fight it. What if copyright isn't a sword, but a grenade? You just throw it out there for anything that might be a possible threat, but without a lot of concern for potentially innocent casualties. One example of this was someone else who had something to say about sexism. If we concede that a reasonable critique of the Twilight film series is that the female protagonist does not have a lot of agency, a lot of people have written about this issue in scholarly articles and blog posts, and this video says the same thing. It takes scenes from Twilight and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and splices them together to create a new narrative. In Buffy versus Edward, Edward Cullen meets a strong female protagonist who takes no crap from vampires. Spoiler, she stakes him at the end. And this video was flagged for copyright infringement not once, but twice by Lionsgate, the film studio behind Twilight. In this case, the creator happens to be someone who knows his rights very well and was willing to fight for them. But over the course of my research, I've talked to many content creators, and I've looked at the chilling effects of copyright law in online creative production. I can tell you with some confidence that for most people, if they get a cease and desist letter about a remix, then that remix will be gone from the internet forever. Because along with this massive amount of creativity and these new forms of creativity comes uncertainty around the law and people afraid of getting into trouble. And who can blame them when even YouTube's official video about their copyright policy presents fair use as something scary, confusing, and it will literally crush you? And before you create your silly remix video and put it on YouTube, maybe you should consult a qualified copyright attorney. And if you do get your video flagged for copyright infringement and you want to fight it, well, in that case, you need to be really sure you're right, because if you're wrong, you could get in a lot of trouble. That's how the law works. So, could people have gotten in trouble for Nyan Cat remixes? Could we have gotten in trouble for the Star Trek stories? Could I have gotten in trouble for remixing this Barbie book? If I didn't know as much about copyright as I do, I might have been very concerned by the first 2 or 3 or 4 people suggesting that I was going to be sued. Maybe I would have taken down the remix out of fear. But what good does that kind of creative suppression do for anyone? After all, Barbie remix actually had a really good outcome. I got a brief taste of internet fame. I have a really good example for doing talks like this one. But most importantly, Mattel really took all of the criticism to heart. Last year, they released Game Developer Barbie. Not only is she wearing sensible shoes, but she does all of her own coding. And the messaging around her involved things like teamwork and creativity and things that I really tried to emphasize in the narrative that I created. This is why it's so important for us to protect creative criticism and for us to protect cool things that aren't harming copyright owners, like stories about Babysitter's Club and Star Trek. Because the internet is for cats, the internet is for saying important things, sometimes at the same time. And copyright law allows us this kind of creative expression. The internet and all of its awesomeness, along with copyright, provide fuel for us to be creative and for us to say important things. So it's our job to take that fuel and to make the internet a little more awesome.